Sometimes all you need is a seriously good steamy book to hear my recommendations, and I'm going to try and convince you to read these books in just a couple words or less. Now, I would just like to disclose that these are all
Is it?
plus.
Is it? I swear to God. You laughing, bro? You trying to laugh? This funny?
Of pretty much any book. However, you speak a word against my baby, and we're gonna have a problem.
Is there alcohol in this? Oh God, honey, no. What kind of mother do you think I am?
Oh no! I can't read! I swear to God! This book is I give up on books! I'm retiring!
One of the first things that people get to know about me is that I am an avid reader. I love books to a worrying degree. My mother was the personification of this meme, so essentially the only form of entertainment I had available as a child was books. The first big gift I ever got was a Kindle in the 2nd grade with a handful of classics downloaded onto it, and the first book I ever remember reading cover to cover was the complete collection of Sherlock Holmes. I had to get glasses at 5 because I was reading so much in the dark that my eyesight was ruined, and whenever I did something bad or worthy of punishment, I had my books taken away. Here are some of my Goodreads stats for over the years, and I make it a rule to always have a book on me, whether digital or physical. Reading is inextricably linked to who I am as a person. Yet, among my friends, I'm known as somewhat of a book pessimist, a hater. My average Goodreads rating is a 2.92 out of 5, and I've rated 27 out of 550 plus books 5 stars. My positive reviews are short, and my negative ones are novels in and of themselves. Before I start yapping, I just want to say that I don't think being a book snob gives me any right to state whether a book holds merit or whether it's meaningless. I think you can gain something from pretty much any book, even if you think it has the dullest characters or the slowest plot or the worst grammar. Establishing an objective bad within art is impossible, and honestly, it's a waste of time. I'm not the arbitrator of your personal taste. That's an individual preference. The phrase I get met with most often, though, when I criticize a Colleen Hoover or Ali Hazelwood or Penelope Douglas novel is, why can't you just let people enjoy things? And honestly, I can't. I think being a hater is good, and I blame BookTok for making it so popular not to be. BookTok is this weird, elusive term for the general community of book lovers on TikTok. The community gained traction back when the pandemic happened, when everybody was stuck at home and bored out of their minds. So creators started posting book recommendation videos and aesthetics about their favorite books, and soon they started blowing up these BookTok books. Soon, it became a full community, and the power within the publishing industry can be seen in recent releases like Fourth Wing or Icebreaker. This is a common criticism for critics of BookTok, so I'm just going to get this out of the way. When I say BookTok books, it's the general branding for those explosively popular books that can attribute a lot of their current success to TikTok. I'm also referring to those books that spawn because of TikTok, because of those tropes and those demands that the readers online want. I'm not referring to those books that are recommended by BookTokers in specific niches. I'm referring to those books. You know those books. The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, Colleen Hoover novels, anything that you would see in your local Barnes & Noble on a table labeled TikTok. I know that you curate your own For You page, and I have received many good recommendations from BookTok, but a lot of people aren't willing to go outside of their own bubble and seek out these well-written, diverse stories, leading to more uncritical consumption and a promotion of these rather bad books. Here are some books that I have personally discovered because of TikTok and loved. I Who Have Never Known Men, Perfume, The Story of a Murder, The Female of the Species, Human Acts, My Dark Vanessa, A Certain Hunger. I'll have a full list linked in the bio somewhere, but please note that I'm not disparaging BookTok as a whole. It's multifaceted. On one hand, it's a place to discover new books, to find community with those who share your similar interests, and to see books that deserve praise and success finally get it. When I scroll TikTok, I see creativity, joy, pleasure, energy, and a contagious enthusiasm for books. However, there is a lot going wrong on this side of TikTok as well. I feel like every single one of my videos revolves around performance under a gaze of some sort, and this is no exception. TikTok's online panopticon promotes performance of a certain aesthetic of reader. It was like entering a parallel universe where reading wasn't just something that someone did for fun. It was a lifestyle, an aesthetic. People were readers like Lorraine Kelly is Lorraine Kelly. You need certain things to fit that aesthetic. A lot of books, obviously, tabs, highlighters, maybe even certain clothing. And don't get me started on dark academia. Stephanie Danler, author of Sweet Bitter, wrote an essay for Bustle about how she just couldn't gel with the platform of TikTok. But my inability to get hooked on BookTok actually has more to do with the way the app works. That it's not a social media app, but an entertainment app. On it, you can't just show a book by Clarice Lispector. The successful accounts performed being a woman who reads Clarice Lispector. TikTok is a churning machine of consumption, and BookTok is no exception. A lot of content revolves around consumption of books, ownership rather than readership. You can see so many people doing book hauls, shopping sprees, book buying bans from how many books they've been buying, and just constantly promoting the newest release over and over and over. It makes me wonder just how many of these people have actually read the bucketfuls of books that they have lying around their homes. Rhiannon Lucy Cosslett writes for Guardian, "Some people treat books like totemic magical objects. This phenomenon is best illustrated by a poster that shows a cat and bears the slogan, 'That's what I do. I read books, I drink tea, and I know things.'" Apologies if you own this poster, but to me it encapsulates everything that is smug and middle class about the cult of book ownership. I don't mean reading, provided you're lucky enough to still have a local library. That is a pastime that is accessible to almost everyone. No, I specifically mean having a lot of books and boasting about it, treating having a lot of books as a stand-in for your personality, or believing that simply owning a lot of books makes one know things. Being able to goofily laugh at the mammoth number of books you read or purchased that year online and to friends contributes to your bookish, cerebral identity. To exude this air of reader, people have been acquiring hundreds and hundreds of books, fueling this trend of overconsumption, jumping onto the trend, needing the newest releases or fancy editions to just look intelligent and trendy. We have BookTok influencers promoting the newest releases, and people will jump on the train and buy it before they even know what it's about. This is the business model of the influencer economy. You forge a connection with your followers, and then you can use that to sell them stuff. You can even see this kind of branch off with celebrity book stylists. Yes, they do exist. And all those cool girl books that you see celebrities toting around in their paparazzi photos. Carrying a book is a symbol of status, a symbol of identity. I stopped making booktube videos because the community had become overrun by commercialism. Near the end of the 2010s, many of the major booktubers had essentially become pawns in the hands of publishing houses. They'd receive boxes upon boxes of books that they'd then haul, basically just show off, and then you never see those books mentioned again. The act of reading became replaced by the act of being a reader. Actual reviews became few and far between, and many of the smaller, genuine readers on the platform jumped ship. It feels like BookTok has got to the same place, only much faster. Now we're seeing readers hungry for a hardcover. They want beautiful covers and end papers and unique art inside for books that look beautiful on their shelves. They want to go online and show them off. The hype just builds and builds. This trend of consumerism has also affected the content that we see within books. If you've visited your local Barnes & Noble at any point in the last year or so, you've probably seen a table labeled romance or fantasy or romantasy, a combination of the two genres. This is no mistake. The genre is growing at a massive rate on BookTok, and more authors are writing more and more books to fuel the growing demand. Adult fiction was the brightest spot in 2023. Fiction print sales grew by 1% or 1.5 million units over the prior year, led by fantasy, romance, coming of age, and historical fiction subjects. This genre of new adult romantasy is driving authors and publishers to churn out similar content. I like to refer to them as popcorn books, easily chewed up, easily forgotten. The rapidly turning wheel of trends means books are quickly sensationalized, but also quickly forgotten. Once the hype dies down, publishers are on the hunt for the next quick read. It's fascinating to try and analyze what it all means for our future, Dina says, but she thinks there's no going back. Publishers are no longer the tastemakers or driving trends in romance. It's coming entirely from the consumers. It creates the illusion of choice within this market, that the consumer is running it instead of the producers, the one who's constantly churning out more and more material for people to eat up. On Medium, Madison Huizinga writes, "The subject matter of popular BookTok books is also of note, as it mirrors the type of content that succeeds on social media itself, digestible and sensational. Similar to the palatable short-form content that succeeds on apps like TikTok, BookTok books of the YA variety often contain predictable storylines that are easy for readers to swallow. We can begin the book confidently, knowing that the enemies will turn into lovers and that the fake dating will turn into real dating. All will be tied up with a neat bow. Yet these books are as chewable as they are laden with spectacle. They often contain a lot of vibrant smut or graphic sexual material. I think that BookTok acts as a helpful case study, showcasing how companies will find any way to capitalize on what people love online. Our current stage of capitalism thrives off bottling people's passions and interests and selling them back to them in a cheapened, sterilized package. This inevitably leads to the erosion of artistic authenticity and books becoming less of an art and more like products that tick the right boxes. When marketing books, publishers are now utilizing methods that jive with the quick formats of TikTok. In order to summarize books and market them efficiently, they turn to tropes. Tropes are typically short phrases that broadly summarize plot points within a story. Best friend's brother, fake dating, enemies to lovers, etc., etc. They're predictable, cliché. Now popular books on BookTok seem solely written to fill in these tropes, instead of having a story injected with thought-out substance. Critics of the tropification of the book industry have weathered similar attacks on their perceived elitism. It's easy to see critics of tropification as supercilious, self-appointed guardians of proper fiction, but tropified literature is not a concern of taste, it's one of content. When literature is reduced to only one trope, and when this kind of literature outsells all others, it signals a concerning future for literature as easily consumable entertainment rather than something that encourages a thoughtful exploration of larger themes. Another level of marketing within BookTok is spice. This is first and foremost not a condemnation of sex scenes within any form of media. We are far beyond the Hays Code era. Spice levels have existed for a long time when discussing books, but now it seems that a large group of people will not read a book unless it has sex of some form in it. For publisher Ali Watts, a strong level of spice across romance and romantasy is a huge factor in the appeal of the genres. Readers are looking for it, and it's considered a strong selling point if it has a good, strong spice level, she says. This need for sexual content has led to two things. One, the miscategorization of adult books as YA because of their cute little cartoon covers without considering the actual material inside. And two, a sort of brain rot that creates books with sex scenes and not much else to indulge in. There are surface-level stories with tropes strung together and romanticization of harmful behavior, but people don't think about that because all they're reading for is the sex. I saw someone say that people who enjoy Colleen Hoover are the people who stopped reading in middle school, back when adults would say all reading is good reading. They've carried this mindset with them as they've gotten older and reading has become trendy again. Now they have this outward behavior of intellectualism, but they don't care about what's actually in the book in their hands. I appreciate BookTok as a concept. I appreciate it for the smart, well-thought individuals it has led me to. I appreciate it for the books it's given me, and I appreciate it for bringing people back into an activity they might have abandoned years ago. BookTok's consequences and general attitude of consumerism, though it might not have started out this way, are just not things that I can get behind, especially this flattening of major tastes into just a few genres. The exceptions to this trend of romantasy, books like Normal People, A Little Life, A Secret History, are waved around to indicate intellectualism. Say, hey, we can read smart books too, we can analyze too. But readers often never move outside of that scope. They read those popular books, they post a video of them crying at the end, and then they just kind of retreat back into their shell. People are not pushing to diversify their reading tastes when they get marketed the same things over and over again. I get it. Romantasy is safe, it's fun, it's predictable. Lee Stein writes for LitHub, a vessel seeking pleasure. As Bailey is speaking, I realize she could be describing every reader in this bookstore. She could be describing me. When we read fiction, we're no longer our workplace name tags, our email addresses, the emergency contact number on the school form. Our lives are hard enough. Readers are vessels seeking pleasure. But I would disagree with that sentiment. It's a dehumanizing one that implies that we are like baby birds, opening our mouths to whatever is regurgitated inside, just as long as it fills our stomachs. We turn our minds off. We eat. We gorge. Solely consuming this kind of literature not only promotes the publishing market to churn out this soulless genre fiction, but it also perpetuates this defensive attitudes towards criticism of any safe material. The final and most dangerous thing that I've seen on BookTok is the rise of anti-intellectualism. I will always be a hater, a critic. I think it's a crucial element of being informed. Yet, as more and more people critique authors like Colleen Hoover or popular books like Icebreaker, a common response from people is, "Can't we all never have fun?" You will begin to cough in 3 days. The moment we stop in this attitude of uncritical consumption like people with rat brains, mindlessly chewing up the pig slop that we're fed, is the day that I can finally rest. Mindless consumption is the key to capitalism, and you are perpetuating a system that does not care about you. Everything is driven by capitalism and consumerism, especially this way that we have adopted reader as an aesthetic label over actual pursuit of knowledge. I want to say before I go any further, I'm not lambasting BookTok as anti-intellectual, or actually anybody reading these books or the books themselves as bad or stupid. An attitude of anti-intellectualism has resulted from the churning machine of online consumerism that BookTok has fallen victim to. Social media provides us with the ability to find a community and learn information in a way that is accessible to us. However, the same platforms can also encourage misinformation, inaccuracy, lack of nuance, and distrust of experts. Now, this is not a revolutionary concept, and I am far from the first person to say, hey, maybe anti-intellectualism is bad, but hey, maybe anti-intellectualism is bad. This concept of "it's never that deep" is steeped in this mindset, a term heavily discussed in Richard Hofstadter's book, Anti-Intellectualism in American Life. He defines intellectualism as such. It accepts conflict as a central and enduring reality, and understands human society as a form of equipoise based upon the continuing process of compromise. It shuns ultimate showdowns and looks upon the ideal of total partisan victory as unattainable, as merely another variety of threat to the kind of balance with which it is familiar. It is sensitive to nuances and sees things in degrees. It is essentially relativist and skeptical, but at the same time circumspect and humane. As Hofstadter implies, there is a line between intellectualism and elitism. Elitism is born out of superiority. Intellectualism is born out of genuine care and understanding. But to complete all analysis with elitism and classism is reductive and diminishes the impact that constructive criticism can bring to a work. I'd also like to push back on the idea that interacting with theory, critique, and analysis is always classist or wholly inaccessible. In fact, I find this idea a bit repulsive, as it seems to imply that poor people or people with less time in formal institutions are incapable of learning or reading or thinking critically. Hofstadter defines anti-intellectualism as resentment of the life of the mind and those who are considered to represent it, and a disposition to constantly minimize the value of that life. It rises from an attitude of skepticism towards intellectuals and a prioritization of common sense over an attained education. Daniel Rigney writes about the effect of modern mass media on anti-intellectualism. If there is an anti-intellectualism of the fourth kind in American culture today, it might be named unreflective hedonism, a flight from the hard and often painful work of reflective thought. We have turned away from critique and contemplation when consuming media, effectively shutting our minds off. To me, it matters less the art that you consume, but how you consume it. Elitism is believing that classics are better than genre fiction. Intellectualism is believing in bringing a discerning attitude to any piece of media, whether it be a 19th century classic or a modern romance novel. This conflation of reflective thought with elitism leads to an acceptable attitude of rejecting intellectualism, because you're fighting against the elites. Classics, or more sophisticated material in general, are equated with snobbish critics, leading people to reject this attitude and the material they associate with it. People will voice complaints about a book that is contrary to popular opinion, and the immediate response is just to uncritically consume more. Just let people enjoy things. This reflective deflection can be traced back to a 2016 comic drawn by Adam Ellis. In it, someone is mindlessly bad-mouthing someone else's interests, and of course that leads to the response of, "let people enjoy things." However, this has now become a blanket statement for all criticism. It's understandable. For the more female-dominated interests like romance novels, they have consistently been the target of misogynistic, bad faith criticism. The relentless stream of belittlement towards women's tastes has led to an attitude of exhaustion when fighting criticism, and it's just easier to lump it all together. But we have to think about criticisms leveled against media just as those criticizing media must think about the validity of their arguments. I'm sure we've all seen this quote at one time. "Maybe the curtains were just blue." This is a popular phrase that criticizes the concept of over-analysis in English classes, when teachers would prod and poke meaning from the smallest things that seem meaningless. The phrase has done detrimental harm to our perspective of analysis and upholds anti-intellectualism like nothing else. Once again, it's understandable, this disdain for the forced analysis in our classrooms and our timed essays. It's born out of exhaustion from classes going through symbolism over and over until it feels like you're just beating a dead horse. But this overgeneralization that all analysis is tedious leads to a detrimental view of critique, the complete opposite that our teachers in schools want to instill in us. Saying let people enjoy things also implies that you do not want to think about what you're taking in. It implies you know what you're consuming is bad and that it has points of valid criticism, but you're choosing to ignore it. Anti-intellectualism is a privilege. Ignorance is a privilege. In her article, Don't Let People Enjoy Things, Kate Wagner writes, "The subtext image is a fourfold confession. 1. I do not want to feel judged for my consumption choices. 2. I want to silence people who disagree with me about this particular piece of media by making them feel like they are cheerless or judgmental. 3. I recognize an aspect of this media that is worthy of criticism and I am defensive of this. And 4. I do not want to think critically about the things I consume, and if I absorb any criticism about the things I consume, it will magically ruin my enjoyment of them." There tends to be this all or nothing attitude when it comes to critics of art. Either you are deeply in love with something and defend it wholeheartedly, or you are a double-horned hater who runs off of spite and malice and being a contrarian. It's a revolutionary concept, but have we maybe considered that people who provide critique don't have black or white opinions on a piece of media? You can probably love something and still dislike aspects of it. I don't know. Whatever happened to nuance? This pseudo-intellectualism promoted by TikTok encourages an optimistic, feel-good attitude towards all media. If I don't enjoy it, I won't read it, or read into it. If we're only allowed to be blissfully joyous about culture, the thinking goes, then none of our joy actually counts. We need to be able to call attention to the negative in order to recognize the positive. By noticing and then analyzing the negative, our entire understanding of a work of art becomes clearer and stronger. If we remain uncritical, we fall into the hands of capitalism. Capitalism thrives off the consumer believing they have the power of choice, only to be given slightly different, equally meaningless products. This is something called manufactured consent, a concept discussed by Edward S. Herman and Noam Chomsky in their book Manufacturing Consent, The Political Economy of the Mass Media. They argue that corporate news media, with their power to fix the premises of public discourse and debate, effectively control what the general populace is equipped to think and think about. Public opinion is thus largely a manufactured product, produced not by conscious conspiracy and imposed censorship, but rather by the shared assumptions and institutional interests of media elites. The corporate media are not distinct from the corporate economy, they contend, but are rather extensions of it, and their filtering of the news inevitably reflects these institutional interests. I don't want to say the F word, but this is a critical element of fascism. Many dictators throughout history have utilized this manufactured consent along with an attitude of anti-intellectualism to make sure nobody questions it. This is why being a hater, voicing criticism, is so important. It's vital. It's good. We should be running towards it, not away. Yes, there is bad faith criticism, but I would argue that that is also born out of anti-intellectualism. It's people taking the lazy way out of exploring why a piece of media makes them uncomfortable. Not only does good faith criticism promote critical thinking in our everyday lives, it also keeps us educated and gives us the tools to prepare for our future, to fight back against the systems that want us to remain uneducated. Emily St. James writes for Vox, "Every film, even one of more marginal success, tells you something about the culture that produced it, and the more knowledge you have of how films are made, of how they can create false narratives we desperately want to be true, and of how they intersect with other forms of philosophy and thought, the more you can understand how they serve as signposts towards whatever is to come next. Cultural criticism is necessary because it is part of how we begin to understand both ourselves and this weird, vibrant, crumbling country we are all a part of." It may seem harmless when you only apply this mindset to booktok romance novels, but that attitude directly transfers into other forms of media, books, TV, movies, news, all which contain relevant cultural topics. This rise of anti-intellectualism can be seen across online spaces, not just booktok. You might have seen girl-splaining taking root across social media. Produced as a direct opposition to mansplaining, girl-splaining has taken a turn for the worse. Mansplaining, the act of a man explaining a difficult concept to a woman in dumbed-down terms because her small woman brain can't handle it, is obviously misogynistic and annoying. So begins the rise of girlsplaining, a woman explaining difficult concepts to a woman through frivolous images and oversimplified metaphors because her small woman brain can't handle it. We're back where we started, the same rhetoric with a different performance. There are other forms of casual anti-intellectualism, from I'm just a girl to I'm a 26-year-old teenager, silly ways of explaining away criticism or ignoring valid issues. You can't I'm just a girl your way out of everything. You pay taxes. You can vote. You're not healing your inner child. You're regressing into ignorance. It takes more than watching an entertaining TikTok that clocks in at under 2 minutes to develop the understanding necessary to see through politicians, journalists, and celebrities' attempts to manufacture consent. It takes emotional fortitude to engage with the seemingly never-ending stream of horrifying information, photos, and video. It takes care to seek out many sources of information, from on-the-ground reporting to books to first-hand accounts. It takes research to determine whether they're credible or not, and media literacy to assess their biases. And most importantly, it requires thinking about what argument is being made, because there's always an argument, even in seemingly straightforward news pieces, who's making it, what their motivations might be, and how it fits into the larger context of everything we've been reading. In all things, but especially this, we actually can't just consume information. We have to judge its accuracy and think about it in the context of our existing worldview and political frameworks. All of which is to say, understanding the world around us does require effort, and that's okay. The need for material to be spoon-fed to us, to be handed to us on a silver platter, and to reduce the amount of work we put in to verify information or seek out resources is derived from anti-intellectualism. In the era of social media, we no longer feel responsible for educating ourselves further from the shallow overview a 30-second TikTok can provide. We have been conditioned to be stagnant and feel disdain for those who choose to dig further. Within this capitalist consumerist attitude that drives our online spaces, being intellectual has no benefits. If it cannot directly produce or consume a product, it is meaningless in the cogs of the machine. That's why being an intellectual, partaking in that identity, is more important than actually being educated. Projecting that label enables consumption in some form, promotes products for the masses to buy. If there is no economic value behind being educated, behind being well-read and critical, why should people care? Capitalism wants us to succumb to this attitude that nothing is that deep, that we shouldn't be reflecting or analyzing things when our energy could be better spent elsewhere, such as consuming the newest romance novel or buying this new limited edition version of a fantasy series. But the far worse alternative would be a world without criticism, a world well-wishing people are now working to build for their bosses, one where monopolistic media conglomerates cater to our simplest desires and most superficial political awareness. Reading critically does not mean writing sprawling essays about the newest 250-page book that you finish reading. It can be as simple as reflecting on the themes of a book, wondering what makes this book tick or what makes it fail, and understanding exactly what message it's trying to convey to you. You do not need the multicolored tabs or handful of highlighters to critically contemplate a novel. All you need is your mind. You should want to delve deeper into the substance of a novel, regardless of if you enjoyed it or not. It's reasonable to respond defensively to criticism of media we love. After all, we feel a personal connection to it, something that makes us feel, something that makes us happy. It's also strange to believe that such information could ruin a specific piece of media, or rather, it suggests that the film or TV show is simple enough to be ruined by a piece of information, or otherwise, that this over-advertised piece of crap entertainment actually, in fact, sucks. Simple escapism and entertainment value is not the aim of art, though it might well be the goal of enormous media conglomerates. We just want to enjoy what we're consuming, right? But to critique something is, to me, the greatest form of adoration. To fully immerse yourself in the contents of a piece of media, to explore the intricacies it holds, is to love it further. Books and all forms of media have this unique power to enable us to feel things we've never gone through before. Don't you want to revel in that experience? When our media landscape is inextricable from capital, we move through the messaging and ideology of monopolized capitalism even as passive witness. To look is to love. It is the quality of being thoughtful that allows us to perceive the pain and pleasure in the sights and sounds around us. And so we need critique, we need criticism, and we need to want to be observant, careful, and patient. These things elevate culture and more importantly elevate discourse. Perhaps with time moving us away from a pithy liberal presentation of marketable representation and into a fluid, poetic, multifaceted cultural consciousness. We need to be continuously pushing an attitude of curiosity, of exploration, both online and offline. This anti-intellectual attitude extends into our schools and our libraries and our laws, into the book bans that we are currently seeing take place across the nation. From Florida's Don't Say Gay law to the Texas's Reader Act, book bans have become more and more prevalent over the past couple of years. Even Governor Ron DeSantis is walking his stance back after his law made it overwhelmingly easy for books to be pulled off of shelves, with over 1,500 complaints made in the past year alone. Book bans actively promote anti-intellectualism, dissuading the general public from consuming media that is thought-provoking or contains complex topics. One of the chief issues that comes with being an intellectual is the growing separation from the uneducated, and book bans seek to further that divide. But anti-intellectualism is often a symptom of a larger problem. Many of those engaged in academic and policy work have lost a sense of obligation to connect what they do to the daily struggles of ordinary people. Members of the intellectual class also must do more to bridge the divide between academia and the wider world. Limiting the scope of literature within public school libraries, one of the only places people can access these books for free, is treacherous for the mindset of the general public, and springboards directly off the back of anti-intellectualism, of this nonchalant attitude of letting people enjoy things. No image is apolitical. Aesthetics carry with them associations which become signs. Art, media, entertainment is made through choices, and these choices carry with them aesthetic weight which necessarily and inherently become political weight. Reading is inherently political because of the associated values between being literate, having access to books, and being educated in general. I think it is incredibly dangerous to sit in comfort while you read and not challenge yourself in any way. I think it is incredibly dangerous to not take advantage of the fact that reading allows you access to different viewpoints, to hear about struggles that other people are facing, and to challenge yourself to go outside of your own mental bubble. Book bans aim to rid our libraries of any books that would challenge somebody's viewpoint, that would continue to strengthen critical thinking. And I think it is so precarious that we promote this mindset that is actively affecting our children in the literature they consume. If we allow this mindset to penetrate across all our school systems, our counties, and our districts, this idea that we do not need to think critically about any of the media that we consume, the books we read, that nothing is that deep and that it's never that serious, we are promoting a lack of critical thinking that then fuels this movement of book banning that is enabling parents to strip libraries of books that they personally do not find comfortable. If we don't detach from this self-absorbed attitude of passivity, we risk losing so many unique perspectives and ideas that promote change. You do not have to agree with this, and you do not have to believe this, but I have always thought that reading is first and foremost about expanding your mind. Reading is the greatest act of empathy that anybody can practice. It's about challenging yourself, having literature change you mentally, emotionally, and socially. I believe reading is one of the greatest tools that we have to fight against the systems and powers that are ruining our country. Reading can and should be enjoyable, but that does not equate to being comfortable. Reading is not an activity for you to turn your mind off, to stop thinking, and mindlessly consume words on the page. Reading should be an activity that keeps your mind going. That's why it's perceived as intellectual, because you are continuously expanding your base of knowledge as you read. If you want to live in this aesthetic of intellectualism, of dark academia, of being somebody who reads, then you need to understand why reading is so critical to education and politics. You can't simultaneously have the aesthetic of being a reader and not understand why it is such a vital act and why it is associated with power and resistance. This attitude, coupled with the consumption habits that TikTok is continuously promoting, results in mindless consumption and people blindly accepting whatever is given to them. You don't think about what you're consuming, you don't think about how much you're consuming, and you don't think at all. I think targeting anti-intellectualism online is incredibly important, especially as more and more children grow up in this digital age. However, I think we also need to direct our energy towards offline anti-intellectualism. What lives online seeps into the real world, into our laws and political systems. If you want to fight anti-intellectualism, you need to be fighting all forms of it, especially book bans. To close this out, I want to read you a chunk of a letter I wrote back in 2021 to my state officials when a Senate bill was being passed around that would effectively make the process of book banning within my state much, much simpler. The bill proposed that all book complaints would be streamlined through the school principal instead of a committee of librarians. Now, that bill has since been signed into law, and the effects of it have begun to take place across my state. My high school librarian texted me last semester to tell me that she was told to pull books off of her shelves. It is incredibly disheartening to see so many similar laws take place across the nation, and 16-year-old Alicia felt the same. My name is Alicia. I am 16 years old, I live in Atlanta, Georgia, and I am writing this to discuss Georgia Senate Bill 226, or GASB 226, a potential new law that would drastically change the process of banning books throughout Georgia. I am not a lawmaker, I am not a government official, I am not a politician, and I do not want to be. But what I am is a constituent of Georgia, a constituent that this law would directly affect. I am part of the 23.3% of Georgian residents aged 18 and under. I attend a public high school. I visit my public library almost every day, and I have checked out an immeasurable number of books over the years. Reading is something that is near and dear to my heart, and it is precisely why I believe this law is absurd in every way. A principal is primarily hired to oversee and maintain a school and foster a productive learning environment, not to take express amounts of time to review parental complaints. You would not ask a fisherman to fight a fire, a politician to design a school curriculum, or a neuroscientist to build a bridge. In the same manner, expecting a school principal to review books, a process previously handled by larger committees and school librarians, is unacceptable and outlandish. I fear this locally based one-person review process will bend to mollify the anger of a few, to rectify a situation that appears easier to resolve by giving in to some parents rather than taking a long amount of time to review. Do we trust the opinions, the biases of a singular person to properly review all complaints with a clear mind and objective view? I understand the impetus behind these actions. We want to protect those we love. It is just as natural as breathing. Parents can and will individually police their children's reading habits, but to have a select group of parents police the majority is absurd. To project a blanket opinion that not only impacts one concerned parent's child, but every child in a school or district is harmful and limits their right to read what they choose. In the Supreme Court case Island Trees School District v. Pico in 1982, the Supreme Court ruled that local school boards may not remove books from school library shelves simply because they dislike the ideas contained in those books and seek by their removal to prescribe what shall be orthodox in politics, nationalism, religion, or other matters of opinion. This is a matter of subjective opinion that threatens to impact the objective expanse of material provided in a school library. As Americans, we are known for one particular freedom, a freedom that allows for dissent, discussion, and dispersion of ideas. Every elected official in the state government has sworn to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution thereof and the Constitution of the United States. These small but dangerous measures to slowly allow the banning of books to become easier and easier threaten not only our school libraries, but the heart of democracy itself. Is this proposal not the very antithesis of the First Amendment, an integral pillar of our country? Are you not part of a nation that prides itself on its literacy rate, its freedoms, and its ability to stand at the forefront of progress? In my AP Literature class, we have already read 2 regularly challenged books, Invisible Man and Slaughterhouse-Five. As far as I am concerned, I have not descended into complete degeneracy yet. These are books that raise important questions about class, race, and war, topics that lawmakers deal with daily, that the ordinary citizen would do well to be educated on. Reading expands knowledge, and knowledge promotes change. As Murakami once wrote, if you only read the books that everyone else is reading, you can only think what everyone else is thinking. Where would we be without opposing viewpoints, without, as the ACLU puts it, the open exchange of ideas in the public, without the potential to think, to read, to empathize with others' experiences and learn? Books are hated and feared because they show the pores of the face of life. I think I read that in a book somewhere.
Chiefly read books to engage language. That's where the rubber meets the road.
Books have given me a magic portal to connect with people of the past and the present. I know I shall never feel lonely or powerless again.
Books break the shackles of time.
He kept being conscious even though being conscious hurts. Reading is a form of thinking. That's why it's difficult to read, because we have to think.
What you're doing is that you are reducing the human identity by removing these books from it, and that is a very grave crime.
And writing taught me everything I needed to know about creating worlds where people could be seen and heard, where their experiences could be legitimized, and where my story, read or heard by another person, inspired something in them that became a connection between us, a conversation. And isn't that what this is all about? Finding a way at the end of the day to not feel alone in this world, and a way to feel like we've changed it before we leave.
And in that sense, I kind of understand book banning, because I think books are a threat to many contemporary power structures, because many of those power structures want us to see other people, especially marginalized people, whether they're marginalized because of race or sexuality or gender identity or mental illness or whatever. Power structures want us to see those people as less than fully human. And so I would argue that if great books have an agenda, it is not a liberal agenda or a gay agenda or a Christian agenda. It is a humanizing agenda, a mission to recognize and acknowledge the human value in ourselves and others.